Hello, and welcome to the Empowered Couples Podcast, where here you get modern, non-boring relationship advice for you and your partner to communicate like pros, fight smarter, and stay on the same team no matter the challenge that you face. I'm one of your hosts, Aaron Freeman, and I'll be your solo host for today. If you've been a listener for a long time, you know that 95% of the time, Jocelyn and I are doing these podcasts together. Super fun. We can just talk about all of the various challenges and topics of conversations that we see coming up in sessions. And every once in a while, we really like to take a topic by ourselves and dive further into it. And today, this topic being 3 mistakes men make in marriage. Now, where does this come from? We're not just coming out of this from nowhere. So we've been doing marriage coaching for 9 years. We just went over 1 million downloads on this podcast. And so for all of you listening, you're the ones that make that happen. So we so appreciate you listening. And we are in really so many conversations. Right now, it's about 100 specific coaching calls a month. That's around 1,200 for the year. We've had over 5,000 specific dedicated conversations with couples over the time that we're doing this. And then on top of the DMs that we get, the emails from our in-person workshops, there's just a lot of conversations that we get into. And so though this is not exclusive to men, there does seem to be themes that arise, and I would say per kind of season. So right now, I want to bring forward a conversation about where we have been seeing men making some mistakes for this season, this period of time, the conversations we've been having in marriage. And I want to kick right off. I'm not going to have you wait too long to actually hear what these mistakes are. So I've come up with 3 R's to represent these mistakes. And it seems like the letter R for some reason is so common for all of the things that show up in relationships. We have, our 5 R's, and the more we go into it, there's just so many R terms. So today, the mistakes being number 1, reserved. The second one I'll talk about, responsibility, and third, receptivity. So let's dive right in. The first mistake that we see men making, being too reserved. Now, I was not the most assertive partner when Jocelyn and I got together. If you're reading our book, we do have communication types, and there is a scale of being assertive and reserved. So there's some personality difference there, but overall, we're seeing a tendency for men to be a little bit more passive, quiet, withdrawn, and this just leads to a lack of connection. So this is kind of a more simple one, but it really just starts to create a little bit of a distance. Now, you're not going to feel this if, your partner, let's say, is a little bit reserved or distant or passive for a couple of days, but over an amount of time together, you're definitely going to start to feel this lack of connection, lack of closeness, and closeness being one of those 3 main components of love that we talked about a few episodes ago. As a reminder of that, you've got closeness, you have passion, and you have commitment, and that kind of being this triangle theory of love. And when you're in a reserve spot, and I would say this comes up because, men aren't as maybe open with what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, their emotions. And, many times when we do get on sessions with couples, the male partner will say something like, well, I'm not really sure what I need, or I'm pretty simple. I don't have any expectations. I don't have any needs. And I understand the premise of that. And it's just not true. In comparison to female partners, maybe it's not as many, or maybe the needs aren't as emotionally deep, but there are various needs from physical to mental to emotional. And we have needs. Like if you're a person that doesn't have any needs at all, then you would never have any upset. You wouldn't have any disappointment, no low satisfaction whatsoever. And we just don't come across that. So the partners that I hear that from, well, we're on a session because there is something that you feel less satisfied by in the relationship. So we just got to go deeper. And so this reserved nature is the first mistake that men are making. And the easy sort of answer is to just open up more often. And a key is it's not just at the prompts of your partner, prompts meaning that your partner is driving the conversation, asking, like, hey, how's the week been? What's your experience been like? What's been showing up? Any challenges, any wins, any celebrations? So not just that, but when our partners do bring up an upset or they're expressing a need, that is not your time to now all of a sudden be assertive, because that hijacks the conversation. So that causes you to go into a different route, maybe conflict cycle, or maybe just your partner feeling not heard, possibly not validated. So the opposite here of being reserved is a little bit more assertive, a little bit more proactive, really about whatever's going on internally, right? And that's really what drives closeness and connection. So the second R here, the second mistake that men seem to make is responsibility. And in this case, a lack of taking responsibility. So a part of this, and I just did a reel on Instagram today on this, responsibility is a couple of different aspects. I believe that men in general are built to, in a sense, psychologically as well as biologically, like, go out there and face some challenges in life. And when you're in a partnership, though you are side by side, arm in arm, there's equality, there's shared responsibilities as far as household things, but this responsibility to kind of go out, go forth, and take on the burden of life's challenges and sort of face that and like take the brunt of those external things that show up in your life and allow for a certain safety or protection, for our partners. I think that's still a real base role that men can play. And so if we take that a little bit further, there's also the responsibility in just having integrity, being your word, following through on what you say you're going to do. And there's a real correlation here to taking responsibility as far as not just complying and saying yes to a request of our partner, certainly agreement. So if you follow us and been listening, agreements being more about the things that you've promised in terms of the repair process. But here it's that rather than look forward, this being in the future and saying, what capacity do I have? I'm looking at my schedule. I'm also looking at what I'm committed to, that when our partners are making requests of us, that we're just really honest about, hey, I hear the need being requested and I agree, I promise, I commit to the action needed so that that need can get met. Now, does this mean that anytime your partner is making a request that you have to agree? No, definitely not. If you're in a relationship, you're obviously looking to be able to meet the needs of your partner. There should be a willingness, there should be a desire, there should be a cooperation there. And we can't do everything. To be honest, Jocelyn's a very fast mover. So she likes to get things done and she'll ask me to do something. And sometimes I'll get frustrated, like, oh, this is on your time, or like, you want me to do this, well, now. And so I just need to be more assertive in those moments, that I don't just say yes and give Jocelyn the idea that I'm going to follow through if that's not what I can do or the timing I can do it in. Because this is what ends up happening. The more compliance, then you don't set the priority, you don't set up what's needed to follow through. And so very likely you don't. Now, if that happens a few times, it's not that big of a deal. But if this is something that starts to become a trend, your partner just loses trust in you. There's just no way to get around that. Trust is simply, you say, well, the old saying, you say what you mean, right? And then you mean what you say, but you also then have to follow through on these things. And if you're not, you start to lose trust. Your partner feels they can't rely on you, they can't count on you. That leads to a whole other dynamic of, I think, lack of respect and lack of attraction. Or if you think about a partner and they're with someone they can't count on and rely on, I mean, how much physical and mental and emotional attraction are you going to have to that person? I mean, you probably start to feel even unsafe in ways. So many times, a dynamic in a relationship where, let's say, a male partner is not feeling that passion, that desire, that drive from their female counterparts, well, you really got to look for yourself. Like, how much responsibility have you been taking on? How much of life's challenges have you been voluntarily facing to strengthen yourself, to grow yourself, to be a kind of leader in those areas for your family? As well as, have you been giving compliance and not following through on the places that you said you were going to? So, really, something for each of us to really look at ongoingly, a self reflection on, hey, have I really been the most responsible with my word that I can be? So, that's the second one. The third one here, the third mistake that men are making in marriage is receptivity. So, receptivity being when our partner is sharing more of an upset or a negative emotion with us, there's a real struggle there. There's a real lack of receptivity to just hear that out. And so, the opposite of that, or what commonly does happen, is some level of defensiveness, just giving some facts, saying, well, that doesn't make sense because I do this and you shouldn't feel that way. Or let's say shutting down. Or stonewalling is a little bit more of a stronger reaction, but just withdrawing and not saying anything, feeling defeated. And that almost leads to the very first point I made here, being reserved, being passive, being kind of checked out, and that being a response to a partner sharing something emotional or an upset. And so, what's the answer with this one? It's getting more comfortable with hearing and accepting and being with your own feeling of hearing these types of negative emotions or upsets. And that can sound like it can sound like an easy thing, but certainly if we give some thoughts to it, we know that it's not. There's really that underlying feeling of potential shame or being a disappointment, maybe regret, maybe in hearing an upset, we realize that we didn't take responsibility or that we've been withdrawn. So there's a lot of, self blame and, not thinking highly of ourselves. And so that can be one of those reasons to go more for the shutdown. And I think even with the more outward reactions like defensiveness, like giving the timelines, giving justifications, it's coming from a similar place. It's that underlying, I didn't want to disappoint or feel this kind of shame or blame. And so it's not the easiest thing to just allow and accept that you feel what you're feeling, but therein lies the getting comfortable with, quote unquote, the uncomfortable. I think it's just an acceptance. All of the reactions are kind of this trying to push away what we're feeling, rather than I just identify what I'm feeling and I accept that I am feeling this. And then there's just a level of holding in my response, right? Even if it's just for a period of time for me to consider what was said, let me at least not just jump in with some sort of response and let my partner at least feel a level of understanding, at least that I'm acknowledging what the experience is that they're sharing with me. So we have talked about this in the last few episodes. If you were to scale the expression of an upset from a partner, right? It could be from, say, 0 to 10. And we've really been considering this a lot. We're humans and we're going to get into times that we are frustrated. So even on both sides, for both partners, is an acceptance that, hey, you know what, like, we're going to get frustrated by things at times, and it's probably not going to come out perfectly. So there has to be an allowance for expressing a level of frustration at, say, a level 2 or 3 on this scale of 10. Now, if a partner is expressing this and it's a lot of blame, it's a lot of finger pointing, and it's with a much more heightened expression, like a 5, 6, 7, or above, I mean, that's something to address, but just consider that. If my partner has some frustrations, there have been some upsets, some dissatisfaction, they're sharing it with me, that's good. Like, you want to know these things because now you can get on the same page. Now you can adjust some actions. And if they're doing this at level 2 or 3, that's really something to consider where, okay, I need to do a better job of just allowing and accepting this. So, a shorter episode here, but these are the kind of mistakes that we've been seeing men make. I laid this out into 3 R's. Again, R's being a kind of common first letter of terms we find in relationships, but the first one being men being more reserved. Second, responsibility or having a lack of responsibility. And then a receptivity to our partners. So really appreciate you listening to this episode, this solo episode that I did. If you're new here, feel free to go to our website link. We have all of our resources at meetthefreemans.com/links. And what you're going to find there is lots of simple guides you can get right away, from making up and moving forward, steps to rebuild a marriage, a de-escalating conflicts guide. Those are just an amazing resources. We've just had thousands and thousands of people get access to these, as well as you'll find things like free web classes, one of the most popular being on the repair process, as well as our books and the timing of our in-person couples workshops. We're also going to be bringing that to different cities around the country. So stay tuned on there. The meetthefreemans.com/links is where we have all of our resources. So check that out. See what resonates with you for where you are. We're all in this to grow. We're all in this to gain awareness and to really face life's challenges as a team, and to accept we're going to have challenges. We're going to have conflicts. We will have frustrations. We'll have things to repair with each other. But if we have the right tools, man, we can really face almost anything that life throws at us as a team. And I would much rather do that as a team with someone than to face that alone. I personally appreciate you tuning in. I love that you're listening, that you're consuming this kind of content, and really hope that you find it valuable and implementable for your relationship. So I'll talk to you on the next episode.